Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. This week, I'm excited to have Caleb David, all the way from Colorado. He works in the real estate space, and he works on creating interesting deals and building community. He's been the past president of the Southern Colorado Commercial Brokers Association. I think they like to call that the SCCB.
There you go.
So that's good. Things that I thought that was worth mentioning about Caleb is his culture for possibility and innovation. I thought was really cool. And where other people sees problems, he sees possibilities. He likes to push boundaries. One thing I read about Caleb is that he's different by design, and I love that. So he's not like everyone else, and that's exactly the way that he likes that. And I've built my little real estate business in the same mode, and so I thought it would be great to have Caleb on. Thank you for coming this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always like to connect with people and share any knowledge that I have that might be useful.
So what I really like is how many years have you? I know that you formed this business in 2020, but what had you done previous to what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so my background actually is in the nonprofit sector. I worked for nonprofits and then ran my own for about 20 years. And my nonprofit, we actually closed it in 2020 due to COVID. What we did is we designed trips to engage people in social justice issues where we would sit on the Syrian border with the Syrian refugee family and understand what's really happening. And I think these things are everything's so politicized, everything's an issue. And what we wanted to do is humanize what's going on in the world. Both my kids are adopted from Ethiopia, so I've done a lot of work in Ethiopia. And so I think taking what I learned from the nonprofit sector and treating people with respect and dignity and listening to people and asking questions has really translated into success in commercial real estate. Yeah.
Yeah, one issue is you're talking too much common sense right now, and as you talk about the world of political, a lot of it is not about common sense, right? It's really more about creating a message, maybe not even a real message, and then trying to make that popular and getting people to support you as opposed to necessarily about people. And so, what I love about what you've just said is that going to the Syrian border is, in the end of the day, they're people, right? And not that we want this to be political, but I feel that if politicians would get in the room and really work on how do you help Americans, an example, not right, left, center, just Americans, I bet people have much more common ground. But when you go on your different TV channels and try to say the word of the day or something like that, it becomes a lot different. But really helping people is what it's about. And that's awesome that you've been able to take that background in nonprofits and to turn it into, I'm assuming, so while this is a profit-based thing, you're what I see is that you're building the communities in a way to best help maybe underserved markets and people that want to contribute to the fabric of Colorado, your city, to the state, to the country, but not everyone is able to do that. And so if people can help out, then you are guiding people and opening doors for people where doors would normally be closed. Is that correct?
100%. And we say we're people centric in all that we do. And that's not just in real estate, that is in life. That is in serving on boards, in meeting with the minority communities that are very underserved. Sometimes there's a language barrier, but we try not to let that be a hurdle. And I spend a lot of time consulting small businesses through the Small Business Development Corporation here in the Pikes Peak region. And so it gives me that opportunity to really help set people up for success and using that experience to help other nonprofits that aren't in the business world, right? They don't really know how to navigate this, but with the background and knowledge that I have, I'm able to bring that to the table.
I like that things are really easy if you're going to be the same person when you're working and when you're not working, because it's not, oh, or it's like in a different phone and I'm going to talk this way in this phone and this, you just be right. You just have to be the best Caleb David that you can be. And you treat everyone really the same way. And you don't have to, like, isn't that the whole point of if you always tell the truth, you never have to worry about what you said because you don't have to recreate a story. You just tell the truth.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so important. And I think sometimes very much lacking in the real estate world, especially I can speak to commercial real estate, is that it's very much transactional and it's very much about just making money. But I find that there's so much more fulfillment in what I do and being able to sleep at night, not worrying about keeping up with stories or anything like that, and coming to the table with a solution-based mindset. And I think that's how we can best serve and love doing podcasts like this because people don't know what they don't know. And commercial real estate can be really intimidating. And I want people to know that it doesn't have to be. It if you think about it, some people look at it a couple different ways. One, people get completely overwhelmed, and two, people have no idea what they're doing. They don't understand zoning and planning and requirements and what the regional building department's going to require. And I don't want people to sign a lease or buy a building if they're not going to be able to utilize it to its full potential.
But isn't that really the case in any business that you don't know what you don't know? And I think the issue with real estate is there's a low barrier to entry, right? Whether it's a real estate agent, you pretty easily, okay, you study for a 75-hour test, you take a test, you pass, you pay some fees, and now all of a sudden you're an agent. That doesn't mean you're a good agent, it just means you're an agent.
Yes.
And it's so again, if you don't, if you're someone that wants to buy in commercial and you get with a bad apple, then you're going to get bad news basically. And so a
Yeah.
lot of it is really what do our clients want and needs, what's their ability, and then you trying to help them find something that meets the parameters that they set up. Plus, being the professional is you're going to think at you need to think ahead of what are other things that might be
Yes.
important, and to try to bring them up so that those things are discussed before the transaction happens, not like after the fact.
Absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. The barrier to entry is very low. And at least in the state of Colorado, the courses for real estate licensing is the same for residential as it is for commercial, but they're two very different markets. To become successful and build your business in commercial, there's a much higher cost and barrier to entry in order for you to get to where you need to go. So I tell people all the time, if you're looking to get into brokerage, you've got to commit 3 to 5 years full time before you get to that place where you feel like I'm established. And so I like to set that expectation for people because it's not just you jump in and you get to go. You've got to find a firm that's going to mentor you, that's going to teach you how to get all these different connections and relationships that affect your clients and the deals that you do. And speaking very specifically to what you said is I've got a client right now that I've been working for doing leasing for about 3 years or so. When they purchased the property, the broker didn't do the proper due diligence. They didn't represent them accurately, and he also represented the seller. So it was a very difficult situation that we're still dealing with all kinds of things today, including a lawsuit because a tenant thinks that how much space they have in there is incorrect. So what had happened in this particular case, and I wish I had been involved on the front end, but in the due diligence period, what they didn't discover was that the seller had a phantom lease for a tenant that did not even exist. So that income that was supposed to be there never was there. And all of the measurements in the building for the tenants were not correct. They didn't take the common area spaces into consideration. So now I've got a client that's got this building that has all these troubles, and we've had to have architects out there multiple times, going back and forth with tenants and trying to figure it out. And so we're finally to the place almost 3 years in of getting closer to getting this corrected. So I think who you hire is extremely important.
Many being I'm more on the residential side. That doesn't mean I don't do commercial. I certainly my expertise is in residential, but sometimes residential people are like, "Oh, can you help me?" So I've certainly done some, but there, it's not really office buildings, right? It would be a space in an office building, generally owned by the owner, and they're a tenant in there. I actually just leased one of the spaces in my building. So it's a smaller building. So I can help, but it's certainly, I only dip my toe in the water with it because, again, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know commercial. So that's when I would try to work on partnering with someone and certainly know that, you can't be all things to all people. So it's much better to specialize because for me, the worst thing would be is to get involved in something where I'm not really sure what's going on and then getting involved. So it's very important to work with professionals. And that doesn't mean you can't be a part of the deal because you can certainly bring someone in. And that's how you do the learning, is what you said, three
So,
to 5 years full time. I see a lot of people on the residential side. They really don't know what they're doing. And it's so if I represent the seller, it's okay. If I have choices, then I'm going to probably pick someone whose agent knows more of what they're doing so that we can get to the finish line. If it's something that there's not that many offers, then then I have to spend more time mentoring to this is what we need. But you got to really take it on a case by case basis. What's interesting is in the world of, real estate, there's so many unknowns and there's so many different ways of doing it, right? It's not like a cookie cutter. In some businesses it's probably it's A through Z and that's all you do, and ours is not like that.
yeah, and I think that's what makes our business an adventure, right? No single situation is the same as another one. Every situation is different, and I think that's what makes it fun.
Every day you pick up the phone and it's a new issue. So it's the same thing where others see problems. It's like, how do we see opportunities or possibilities is actually the words that you use. I have ones where I have some lawyers are like, really, Danny, can you ever give us one that's easy? I'm like, I can't help it with reverse mortgages, with estates, with liens on the house, because ultimately if your goal is to try to help people, then I'm not going to look at what that is. And sometimes it's that I get the ones where other people refuse to do it because A, they don't have the talent or the dedication or the desire or the time to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
That's what I have those.
yeah, and I think we also have to be a good agent. I think you have to have a certain level of humility and curiosity because sometimes there's things that we don't know. We've got to find that out. And that's our job to tell our clients, I don't know, let's go find out. And I think it's vital. It's vital because we have to be proactive and anticipate what could potentially happen based on the information that we have.
Well, old school word would be a Rolodex, but obviously that's the Rolodex or our contacts in our phones. But ultimately, my job is to be the quarterback, right? And so I'm not the wide receiver. I'm not the offensive line. I'm not the coach. I'm not the sponsors. My job, that's my job. And so I might have to, some plays might be called into me, but others I'm going to have to on the fly in the huddle change. And so I'm not going to every play, right, run the ball myself or throw it myself. I have a team of people and I have to bring in the experts to help make me the best quarterback.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, I don't know if he's even the best arm thrower or whatever, but he's the best damn quarterback probably ever because he would work with whomever they gave him. He made it happen. And I think that is more of his stardom is how he adapted himself to the people around him and brought in if they felt that they needed a receiver, they bring a star receiver in. Isn't that it? I just made that analogy up during our
No,
podcast. I think it's appropriate.
I love that because I literally say that to new clients. I'm like, my job is to be the quarterback. I'm not going to do everything, but my job is to have an idea of what's going on the entire field and know when to make certain calls. And I think that comes with the responsibility of leadership and being willing to step into that leadership role. And yeah, you take some hits. But I think it's a perfect analogy that when you're looking for a home, when you're looking for a commercial space, find the right quarterback.
Yeah, I'm certainly not the best dressed. I'm not the best looking. I'm not the young. And I feel like we are from looking into a little bit, we're probably more the same. You want to be the best Caleb you can be. I just want to be the best Danny I can be. It's we don't need there's no we don't need to be perfect, but if we invest our time and effort to find the right people and get things done, that's ultimately what it's about. And it's about caring. And the golden rule is probably one of the most important things of do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. So if I was purchasing, what are the things that I would want someone to protect me or bring people in or to make sure that this investment that I'm doing is I'm going to be as protected as I can? Because obviously things happen every single day. This is real life, but how do you pivot, right? Pivoting is probably another important tool to have in our toolkit.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something that I bring to the table when I'm talking to clients is I'm number one, talking about the integrity, is I'm never going to tell somebody to do a deal that I wouldn't do myself. I've been a landlord, I've been an investor, small scale, but still. So when I go to talk to somebody about their retail building that they're looking to lease out, my conversation with the owner is, listen, I've been a landlord before. I know what this is. So I'm not going to put you in a position to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Now, some landlords don't listen. And then, who gets blamed for it? Us as the broker, right? I've had landlords build out spaces before there was even a signed lease, and then they back out. So there's a lot of that stuff. There's some things we can't control, but I think it's our job to do the best that we can to control what we have in our power.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So it's interesting. So it's not, if I represent a client might have, you said that you wouldn't have someone do something that you wouldn't do. I think that's generally true, but there are cases where someone comes with a parameter that they need to have this type of house and this is their budget, or they say it has. So someone could give you a parameter that would never be your parameter. So ultimately, sometimes people say, what do you think of this house? And so I'm very blunt about it. But on the other hand, I also realize it's not the house that I'm going to be living in. And I say that all the time.
Yeah.
This is the house for you, right? So based off of the parameters that you gave me, you needed this, you needed that, you needed the other thing. I think this is a good house for you. Or I would, conversely, I would say, why are we even looking at this? Because you've said that you don't like this, and this house has two of those three things, and you can it's also like you can have really whatever you want, but you can't always because you might not have the money or there isn't that there. But generally you need to pick and choose, right? You need to pick and choose the things that are the most important to you and then go from there.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's our job to ask those questions and to be in tune with our client to understand what those things are. And yes, it may not be the deal I would do, but I will give my opinion if I feel like it's a bad idea. However, I tell my clients ultimately it's your decision, it's your money, it's your investment. And if this aligns with what works for you, then I'm good. I can sleep at night because we're working on this together. It's a team, right? And I think communication is super, super important.
I just had a client today. It's a commercial property. So it's funny. It's great that we're on the phone. I've done a bunch of deals with him, and what I love about him as an investor is he takes out his pencil, he does his P&L, and that's his number. He generally gives you his only number because I've done the math. This makes sense for me. So we were going back and forth, and we got it down a lot lower than list. List is just, I always tell people, it's just a couple of people sitting around at the table throwing darts and saying, let's see what we can do. So there's no magic necessarily to that. And so we come up with a number. And in the end of the day, he was like, he was at his number. And then when he got a counter, I can only really come up this little. It's a token amount just to show them that I'm interested. But there was this thing called commission. And the commission, when I looked at what the commission was, I basically knew that if I took a third of what potentially I could get him to his number. So I do a fair amount of business, and I always say you don't take percent to the bank, you take dollars to the bank. And what I said was, and he does a lot of business, so it's not like this is not good. But I said to him, my text to him, he's actually in Panama net right now. He was like, we had to talk because I'm about to get on a boat. I'm like, are we going through the Panama Canal? Or are we just in Panama? I didn't get that out because we were talking about the deal. But I said, does this asset make sense for your portfolio? I said, if it does, you have my commission. You can chop it up any way you want to get the deal done. And so I think it's going to work about, I'll make a third of the number. But but I'm not looking, and I told him, I go, we're not in a transactional business. We're in a long-term relationship. And if this helps you get this, you know what? and then you can start making money. That's how I'm adding value, right?
100%. And I think it's a long game that you're playing. This is not just transactions. And that's a lot of my clients are that way. And if it takes us sacrificing a little bit of income to make a deal happen, then that's fine. I've had deals where I've done the exact same thing, but then there's some vacancies in the property. So then I turn around and get to lease it. And then when it's time for them and they want to sell, they're going to come to me. So I think it's very short-sighted of real estate agents and brokers to get stuck on a percentage, like you said. And as we know, these things are always negotiable. And I think if we do right by our clients, then they talk about us to their people.
Agreed. And that's partly when you see above me my the adventures of a real estate broker, Remax is really I bought my own, I created my own franchise so that the only the only guiding light for me was what made sense. Not because that's the way it's always been done or corporate says we have to do this, because I actually got the largest house sale in my town because others would go in and said, my company says I can't do a commission less than X. And
Yeah.
then someone said, Danny's this flexible guy. He might do it. And their view, the seller's view was because my house is twice as expensive as everyone else's, why should I have to
Yeah.
pay twice as much when the work isn't really twice as much? And so that's another case of you take money to the bank, you don't take commission to the bank. And you know what happens? They're selling. We're going to be closing in like in a month and guess what? They're buying something.
Yeah.
And they're buying, and I'm actually negotiating. I cut a little bit on the because it was the same thing. There wasn't a meeting of the minds, but I knew that there was this commission. But it's let's say the commission on both properties is $60,000. Did I deserve double that? I guess you deserve whatever you can get. But for me, I'd rather be a deal maker, right? Because
Yes.
someone that's doing a buying and selling and me making $60,000 and I'm the broker, right? So I think it's more than enough, right? It's absolutely more than enough. And then I get the accolades of selling the most expensive house in my town. I also get a purchase, and then you keep moving things forward. I'm very much not a percent person. I'm more of moving things ahead, helping people. Then obviously everyone in town's, oh, Danny helped sell that house. And that's just an example of thinking outside the box, pushing the boundaries. The boundaries are only what we set for ourselves many times.
Yeah. But I think in our business, there's a lot of brokers and agents that have ego, and we all have ego, right? But I think it's our job to do our internal work to make sure that we are operating out of a place of authenticity, out of a place of integrity, to be able to serve properly and not be pretentious about it, not be arrogant, being humble, and like you said, be a deal maker. And there's so many times that I'm working a deal right now with a broker that has the biggest ego you could imagine. He's got the nicest car and thinks he hung the moon. But if I'm working a deal that's right for my client, it is my job as my client's agent to put my ego and frustrations aside to make this happen, to do whatever I can to get it to the finish line.
It's 100%. One of my friends is actually moving to Bermuda, and I'm selling his house in town, and we got like a couple of offers, and one offer was so over the top, like ridiculous over the top. Didn't even need to be that high. I represent the seller, so it's not my job to be like, I would have never bid like that. I would have gotten it for legit 200,000 less. That's how bad it went over. But it's good for my client. But in the end of the day, I'm used to sometimes pushing the buyer's agents, getting to contract quickly so that you don't want to lose any steam. And it was such a high offer that and I'm very good friends with them. They're like, no, you don't push. So I did step out of my comfort of normally, because there was a couple of things that I was like, I could have pushed. I didn't want to lose it because again, my due diligence is to my right is to they're my friends, but my friends and my clients is to make sure that it happens. And so there was no pushing. We gave them the little bit of extra time. It was such a lofty number. When we work for, I have clients that have me. Some people like Danny, you just do whatever you do. I have do that. Other people, listen, some of our clients like to be more involved in our transactions. I've had clients that have asked me to help. They wanted to see the exact order of all the pictures of my listing and they wanted to have the wording of my listing for them to edit it before it went live. And you know what? It's their house. It's we serve at the it's an honor for us to serve them. And so it's not about the ego of I don't worry, I do 60 of these a year, I'll get it right. So, no, you have interest. Okay, let's work together. Let's do it. Which is actually funny because I had one of my clients, he's a doctor. I've done like 6 transactions with him. He he's a doctor, but he really wants to be in real estate. That's like his passion is always that. And so he got very involved, very involved. And then it turns out that he had done some work in the house without permitting. And those pictures and the wording of what was those things were in the listing. And that's how the town actually nailed him. The town was like, how can that be new? We haven't had a permit pulled in 10 years. And we both spent a lot of time working with the town to open permits, close permits, and we made it happen. But it wasn't like if I would have written those words, right? He could have come back to me and say, why you got me? You got me in trouble. As opposed to he's like, yeah, those are the words that I wanted you to use. And I had told him to lay off, but that's what he wanted to do. And that's the beauty is he was able to do it. I think in the end of the day, it costs like $20,000 to open and close permits. The house was $1 million house. It wasn't the biggest deal, but that's what actually caused it was that the town looked at the Zillow or and saw that it said it showed new things and it said that it was new. And so that's an example of he was very meticulous involved. I let him be involved, and then it actually saved me in the sense because then we did have to work together to fix it, but he was never upset because he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So
Real estate is a team sport. And ultimately, I think it's really important, especially if there's newer agents out there listening, it's important to, yes, to do what your client would like, obviously, unless it violates some sort of law or ethics boundary that is in place. But ultimately, yes, we have to protect ourselves because it is a very volatile situation to be in. I would say probably more so in homes than in commercial real estate. There's a lot of emotion involved. There's timing, there's pressure, there's all these different things. So it's really important that we stick to our ethics and what is right. And thankfully, in your situation, he took responsibility. I've had situations where sellers or landlords haven't. Sometimes you just, like I said earlier, you sometimes you take one for the team, but I think if you're the quarterback, then you're doing what's best for everyone and you're doing what you can to cover your own self so you don't get knocked out.
I love that you said it's a team sport. I say that all the time. So a lot of it is it's first time home buyers or people, even though someone, unless you're a seasoned investor, you've done this a couple of times. So it's going to be new to you. Because like you said, you have to do it multiple times. You have to, what is it, 10,000 hours of something to become an expert. So let's assume that almost all of our clients are not experts, whether they've sold a couple. So it's all about how we communicate with our clients as to the team sport because there are people who stereotypically would think that every single house that they see, I should put in front of them. Or the old days where you would drive into a real estate brokerage, right, an office where the keys for the properties that you're going to be showing that they are in the office. And then you're doing like you're seeing 4 or 5 houses of what's available with the keys. With this thing called the internet is this cool thing. So people have seen houses before, even before they're probably calling us, they've already looked at stuff or they've done open houses. And I say that there are many ways that you're going to see houses. Of course, I'm going to set you up for alerts, but you know what? There might be some things that are for sale by owner. There might be things that didn't pop up. There might be private sales. And, or you're going to see it before I send it to you. Even though I try to automate that as much as possible. I said,
Yeah.
me finding the house and me opening the door are the two least important things that I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if that's all we did, there are ways to basically get a door open for
Mhm.
much less money and then you're on your own. I go, that is the least of what I do is yes, I do have the technology to open the door and I can route, but that you want me to protect your interests as you're putting your hard-earned money and your and a mortgage behind whatever property that you're doing. That's and that's like our secret sauce.
Absolutely. And I think just to speak to commercial, it's a little bit more of the Wild West. So it makes it even that much more difficult. And in commercial, we don't have the same technology. There's either a lockbox, or you've got to coordinate with the listing broker. So it's a little bit more manual. It's a lot more work. And if you're going online thinking you're finding every commercial property that's out there, you're wrong. We don't have an MLS that says as soon as something is sold or leased, you take it off the market. There's less checks and balances. So it can be very frustrating to a consumer or a business owner, because I do have clients that will say, I want to look at this. And I go look it up and I'm like, it's been off the market for 2 years. So it's even that much more important if you're looking for commercial property to have somebody that knows and has relationships with other brokers in town and understands the nuances of what's going on in the market, as well as zoning and all of that. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. And like I said, it can be really frustrating, especially for someone who's only done it once or twice or not at all. And you need somebody that can take you and point you in the right direction, because time, if you start showing tons of stuff to people, I'm sure you've experienced this, that they don't really want, but they want to see it over time. There can be some frustration that builds up in between. So I think it's super important to set realistic expectations and goals from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's expectations. And I think also as we get to know our clients, right? So maybe not the first time we're out for showings, but you really have to be that person that pushes the envelope and tell them maybe the things that they don't want to hear. I have a client right now, and it's I sometimes it's not that I sometimes I'm the Danny the realist. And I'm like, you can't afford this, or this also has this, or this is not. And to be honest, if they show me, if they say, what about this house? I'm going to say why we should or shouldn't see it and why it does or doesn't work. And again, it's why it's not. So someone today sent me, it's a rental in a very nice area because they need to get their kids into the school district. And the address wasn't really known, and I'm like, this is an illegal apartment in someone's house. That's why it's being presented this way. And
Yes.
if it's just you and one other person, but because you need the schools, if the school found out that this is where you're living, they might be like, that's not a multifamily house, it's a single family house, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, or it's sometimes it's if they're not putting the address there, then how do we know? Is it really the owner, not the owner? Are they asking you to go get a phone card and send them the money? It's generally, if it's not up and up, then something's wrong with it. But
Yeah.
that's our job to help find those things.
Exactly. And I think it's something that people don't really think about. If you hadn't brought that up, they would have never known. I had a listing about a year or so ago where I was leasing. It was an old house that had been converted into a commercial building. My client had her business in there. And so someone was moving out. So I was going to lease out one of the offices that she had. But then she also had a basement that she wanted to lease out to somebody. And I'm like, great idea, right? Go to the assessor's website to get things, and all of a sudden I realize the assessor's not counting the basement square feet in the tax assessment. And so I immediately went to my attorney, and it's important for real estate agents to make sure they have a go-to attorney. And I talked to her about it. You can't list that. They're like that square footage doesn't exist. Now, and one of the reasons she wanted to lease out the bottom space is that taxes that year had almost doubled for her. And so I need some additional income to pay those taxes. But in walking her through it, we realized that was not the right solution. Now, eventually, another broker went in and decided to do it. I don't know where that's ending up, but I knew for myself, I couldn't put myself in the crosshairs of that because legally the space doesn't exist to even lease.
Right. I say that a lot to people where we have a house that's being rented and it's owned by like a church, and the church did something in the basement and someone's living in the basement. I said, we can't lease that space. Well, we can't do it because it's not legal. It's not zoned that way. They're gonna have to do it themselves or whatever. But we have to know. You said we have two rules, and what's ethical and what's legal. Right. Those are the guiding principles of how I make my decisions. So I can be very creative and do and make deals happen as long as is it legal and is it ethical? And as long as those two things are met, I'm gonna try to do whatever I can to make it happen. And those things of thinking outside the box and being a problem solver are things that people remember and refer friends and family and contact you again because they know that it was unusual. You made things happen and you invested. And sometimes you can't do it, right? Sometimes when you're trying to think outside the box, I have one right now that it's almost impossible trying to foreclose on the person. It's a co-op, which is basically an apartment building with shares instead of, and so they're making it so difficult where they're almost forcing her to be foreclosed. We came up with solutions of me doing the work with a contractor and then selling it, but there's just not enough trust with the management that the owner wants to do it. So she might just be deciding to walk away. But the example was that I gave her options to prevent that from happening. And it was up to her to decide, does she want to do it or not do it? And so in the end of the day, she said she didn't feel comfortable doing it, which is actually good because it would have been more stress for me to
Yeah.
try to fix her problem, right? Because that's the problem when you're a solver, you try to fix everyone's problems, and some problems can't be solved. But I don't like to think like that, and
Yeah.
I like to try. And sometimes that means like you take a hit, but I'd rather be the person that tried something that's almost impossible and failed because the only way that you can have really good triumph is that if everybody could do it, then it would be easy, is to try to do the things that are almost impossible. And if it actually works, it's very satisfying.
Absolutely. No, and I think of a situation that came up several years ago on a parcel I had listed for sale for many years. And we finally got it under contract. As we go through the due diligence, a lot of agents and brokers don't necessarily read title work, but that's one of the things that I think that a lot of the clues that the title work tells the story of the property. And if you don't read the story, you don't know what's going on. We discovered that there was an old commercial HOA in place, and other brokers had sold multiple land parcels around there for years. So I went to that broker and I said, "Hey, I'm like, how did you overcome this?" And he was like, "Oh, I just sold it." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, so I'm representing the seller and you've got a buyer who says, "I'm not moving forward because if this HOA gets reactivated, they have the ability to go back and ask for back pay for dues that were, that should have been
Right.
in there." And this HOA, I had heard that the HOA had gone defunct. And so I reached out to the title company. We're trying to figure out how to solve this problem, and they couldn't find anything. So I just said, okay, I'm going to figure out what I can do. So I knew there was a residential architectural committee nearby, and the guy who ran it had been around for 30, 40 years. So called the office. The lady told me, she's like, oh, they went bankrupt. I overheard in a conversation they went bankrupt. So I went to Google, started researching, and within a day or two, I discovered that this particular case about this HOA was being taught in a law school in Missouri. So I was able to take that documentation that proved that there was a bankruptcy, take it to the title company, and now all the property owners around there, that stuff is removed. And this was a long process. It ended up taking us 18 months to close this parcel of land, but it goes to show that what a little bit of curiosity and research can take you a long way.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's a good story. So, the reason why my podcast is The Adventures of a Real Estate Broker is because as we're doing our jobs, crazy stuff happens. And I'm actually writing a book. The book is written, it is being edited right now. So, I'm hopeful in a couple of months we're going to have it out. But it is precisely stories like that where going above and beyond. One of the houses I sold, the person I helped sell it for the estate turned out to be the nephew. He didn't even know he had an uncle. And then when he
Wow.
went to his mother, yeah, there's an uncle. He never knew. And the man was like 50, right? He's yeah. But in the house, there happened to be two skulls there, and they were human skulls. And we called the police, and there was pornography, and I had to sell car. I sold two cars, two houses. And so crazy stuff happens, but it's really with everything, it's where others see problems, we see possibilities. Where do we go from here? How do we help sell? I'm right now also selling a house where two people own the house and one of the people passed, and the way that there are two different families. There were two men that owned the houses. They were friends, and one died. I guess it was joint tenants in common, right? Where one dies, it goes to the other. So it goes to the other. So the one who died's family gets nothing, except that family's living in the house right now and paying the mortgage. And I'm like, and they're like, what do you mean you're selling? We've been paying the mortgage. We get to live here. We're like, yeah, that was your rent. And now, and my person's actually no longer, he's actually no longer competent. So the kids are trying to sell the house so that they
Right.
can help with their father's affairs.
Yeah.
And they're not helping us with the mortgage. They're not help. I don't have access, so I'm putting it on the market. We have the deed. The deed is very clear that who the owner is. They didn't really like that, and they wanted to buy it, but they're not really being helpful. I tried to set up an appraisal so we could find out what is the house worth, and then we'll sell it to you for what the house is worth, not putting it on the market. And
Yeah.
they've gone rogue, and we're going about it our way. But my client happens to be the current owner of the house, and so you're giving the different options on how to do it, and that's always interesting, selling a house where no one has access, and you're selling it with tenants in it. And what's
Yeah.
interesting is those people pay the mortgage, and
Right.
every month they they wouldn't tell. I know who the mortgage is, but I don't have an account number, and the bank's not really talking to us without knowing the account number because they hid it what the bank number was. So later on, I'll be able to figure it out because there's actually fraud now because they're calling in and pretending to be a dead person and
Mm.
paying the money for the mortgage for the dead person. And at some point, we're going to bring the lawyers to call the lender and saying that person doesn't own the house. So you have a mortgage for someone that doesn't own the house and he's no longer alive. And
Yeah.
that process might be like, yeah, oh, yeah, we do want to sell it now because we want to
Right.
make sure that we get paid. And so it's interesting because as I even said that information, they're just thinking, they put their head in the sand. But again, we tried to do it. We tried to bring an appraiser in and sell it. We would have even given them a discount because they're already there.
Right.
So it's like, I didn't, you know what? When I first picked up the phone call for the person asked me to sell his father's house, I didn't know that's what it was going to turn into.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's a low end house, so it's never going to be worth the amount of money, but
Yeah.
it makes for a good story, and it also adds to my it's another notch in my belt of experience, right? So now there's a lot of different aspects to it, and I'm learning. And of course, you said it best. Every real estate person needs to have their go-to attorney because I'm dealing with the title company, I'm dealing with the attorney. What does this mean? What does that mean? How do we go do this? So I'm not, again, I'm just a quarterback. I'm bringing in my experts to help me guide the owner. It was funny. The power of attorney was not necessarily executed properly. So we looked at the power of attorney and I wanted to get ahead of it. And my title people, who was a lawyer too, was like, that's not correct. And
Right.
so they had to go back to, and so we're in New York. It was their power was signed in Michigan. They had to go back to Michigan to have the lawyer restate stuff and re-sign it. And then they also needed the notaries to affirm because the person like signed it in 6 months or 10 months ago. He was competent 10 months ago. He's not competent now. And so the person had to sign that he was competent at the time of his signing. And so what's
Mhm.
interesting is you have to get someone to sign that. But
Yeah.
it's my thoughts were as long as we can find the person, I would assume that the person would sign that document because if they didn't sign the document, then they're affirming that they had someone sign a document when they weren't in the right state of mind. They wouldn't want to do that. So sometimes, right, when you bring those things up like that, they're like, "Oh, it is in my best interest to sign." Because obviously, if the person was a teller at a bank, how does
Mhm.
a teller at a bank that can't know someone's competency? But she did see the person there, the person they discussed it, right? And the person was like, yes, I do want. So that's all that, so at that point, there is no reason for the bank teller to not think that the
Yeah.
person was competent when she signed it. So that was all we needed done.
Yeah. It's an
It's
adventure. It's an adventure
oh,
out there. And I think exactly these stories are the reason why, yes, they're the exception, but it's why they like people, AI is not going to save the world, right? You still need competent professionals to help guide you through the process.
exactly. So I think my kids hate when I use AI. I only use it. I sometimes do use it to help with some of the writing of the listings because I like to say, "Oh, see what they come up with," and I take it and I edit it. But my kids are mad because I've been using AI. I think is using a lot of energy
Yeah.
and resources and for water and electricity and all that. So they get mad at me for that. But yeah, ultimately, I still think it's a people business, because again, AI is used in a lot of different things, but ultimately, probably not here yet. I can't worry about things that I don't know about, and the real future. All I know is, like you said, when the phone rings and it's a buyer who's not demanding that I talk to them on WhatsApp, and they're a king of an African country and they have billions of dollars to spend, and it's an actual real person that I can meet and show them places. For the most part, I think I'm here to help them, and so that's what I can do. I can't be all things, but and at some point that might change and go and pivot. We need to pivot, and there'll either be a role for us or there won't be a role for us.
Yeah.
We've been talking for a little bit. We could do this for hours, and then I'm sure people would be sleeping by then if they're not already. But I love how you run your business, Caleb. I think we run our businesses in the same way, with the golden rule being pertinent, important, and the culture of possibility and innovation, and trying to help people think outside the box. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
Um,
you.
can you tell us where, if someone, they're in your marketplace and they're looking, how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. So I actually just started a podcast a couple months ago. So if there's anybody out there that's curious about commercial real estate and just wants to be educated and understand a little bit more, just find us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. It's Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. You can also find me on Instagram, and that's at Caleb David. Same with Facebook and LinkedIn. Would love to connect and have conversations. If you're just wondering what next steps you need to take, or you just need somebody to talk to, we're here to do that for you for free. And if it turns into a transaction, great. One of the things I always like to point people to as well is a great nonprofit that I do a lot of work with called Crazy Love Africa. They do a lot of work with women with HIV in Uganda and supporting their kids and their families. My business is a way to create platform for good work that's happening in the world. So give Crazy Love Africa a follow, and also check out their Fair Trade online store. It's pretty cool. And that's just crazyloveafrica.org.
Thank you so much again. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I will check out the website. Maybe one day I'll even be on your podcast. But thank you very much, and everyone, for another edition of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. It's Daniel Berger, and it was my pleasure having Caleb David on this week. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.